The betta fish that we see in stores look nothing like the bettas that are found in the wild, because those colorful store-bought fish with their long flowing fins are not a product of natural design, but are the result of many years of selective breeding by humans. And there's little doubt that these captive-bred bettas are incredibly beautiful fish. But all of this beauty comes at a cost, and I'm not talking about the price that you pay for these fish at the register. I'm talking about the price that's paid by the fish, because those oversized fins are completely unnatural and have no benefit to the overall well-being of the fish. In fact, those long flowing fins makes it very difficult for these fish to swim, so they get tired much more quickly than their short-finned relatives that live in the wild. And those beautiful fins are also easily damaged by other fish, as well as aquarium decorations that have sharp edges. These injuries to the betta's delicate fins can then lead to fungal infections, which can spread to other parts of the body as well. In fact, in some cases, those long fins are so troublesome to the betta that they'll sometimes bite at their own fins in an attempt to remove them. I've seen it happen, and it's a heartbreaking thing to watch. The decision to bring a betta fish into your home is not one that should be taken lightly. You choose the size of their world, you choose how clean to keep their water, and you decide what kind of food they'll eat, as well as how often they'll get to feed. And yet, many people seem to lack either the compassion or the knowledge to treat these beautiful fish with the kindness that they deserve. So many bettas are destined to live brief, unhappy lives in a tiny bowl of dirty water. I knew a woman named Susan that had a beautiful veil-tail betta. It lived alone, neglected, and forgotten in a little bowl on a dusty bookshelf. She called him Never Dead Fred because she said sometimes she'd forget about Fred for a week or more, and Susan was always amazed that he was still alive when she finally remembered that he was there. I tried to show her a different way of keeping the fish, and I even offered to give her a 5-gallon tank so that the poor little betta would have a bit more room to move around. But I think Susan was a little insulted by my offer to help, so she insisted that she had no room in her house for the tank, and Never Dead Fred eventually died from neglect. Now, I'm quite sure that Susan wouldn't be happy living the rest of her life in a room the size of a closet, but for some reason she thought that it was okay for her betta to spend the rest of its life living in a little bowl. But it's not okay. In fact, all betta fish need a tank that holds at least 5 gallons of water or more. And if you give your betta fish a 10-gallon tank, it will be living like royalty. Shallow tanks are preferred because bettas need to reach the surface in order to breathe, so really deep tanks make it a bit more difficult for them to get air. And as your betta ages and becomes less active, it will become increasingly difficult for it to swim to the surface and take a breath of air. Furthermore, if your betta becomes sick for any reason, lowering the water level in the tank will make it much easier for the fish to breathe, so more of its energy can be used for healing rather than swimming to the surface to take a breath. While bettas can live without a filter, some filtration does help to keep the water clean. However, they don't like a strong current in the tank, so a small sponge filter seems to work best. And this is especially true for those bettas that have large fins, because it will be even more difficult for them to move around in a strong current. However, as long as the water is kept clean with regular water changes, the betta fish can live trouble-free in a stagnant environment because they get their oxygen by going to the surface of the water to breathe. so there's really no need to provide them with an air stone or a filter. The betta's mouth is designed for feeding at the surface, and while they can feed off of the bottom of the tank, it is a bit more difficult for them to see the food and then pick it up. And this is especially true for those bettas with very long fins, because they have a bit more trouble swimming, so floating pellets are an ideal choice for feeding your betta. However, live foods such as the blackworms that you see here are always a nice treat. But be careful not to overfeed your fish, because overfeeding can lead to digestive problems such as bloating and constipation, which can then cause the swim bladder to malfunction. If you live in an area where it gets cold, it will be necessary to provide your fish with a heater, because bettas prefer a temperature of around 78 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 26 to 27 degrees Celsius. You'll also want to make sure not to place your aquarium in an area where the sun will shine directly on the tank, because direct sunlight can cause the water to get too hot. And this overheating is more likely to occur in small enclosures such as bowls or tiny fish tanks. Too much light can also cause an excessive growth of algae in the tank, so keep your aquarium away from the window. Adding a timer to your aquarium light can also help control the growth of algae. Your choice of substrate is also important. Using large materials such as marbles or large gravel in your betta tank will allow food to become trapped in the empty spaces in between the gravel, where it will then be out of reach of your fish. This uneaten food will then begin to rot, which may cause water quality issues that might then create a whole host of other problems. I prefer to use sand in my betta tanks because the uneaten food will remain on the surface where I can see it. This allows me to see when I've given my fish too much food, and it also makes removing the extra food much easier. You'll also want to avoid using any aquarium decorations that have sharp edges that might harm the fish. Also be sure that anything that you put in the tank is aquarium safe, because non-aquarium related products can leach harmful chemicals into the water as they age. Using live aquatic plants in your betta tank is also highly recommended because live plants help to keep the water clean and create a more natural environment for the fish. Bettas also like to rest on objects near the top of the tank so that it's easier for them to reach the surface and take a breath, and this is especially helpful for bettas as they get older and have more trouble swimming. Aquatic plants with large leaves, such as any one of the various Anubias species, would be perfect. They're easy to grow and make an ideal resting place for your fish. It's also best to provide a cover for the tank because a lid on the aquarium will reduce evaporation and help keep the water warm. A secure lid will also prevent cats and other pets from disturbing the fish and possibly introducing contaminants into the water. Avoid keeping your betta with fish that have a reputation for fin nipping, because those long flowing fins of the betta are a tempting target for many species. On the other hand, some bettas can be aggressive, and they'll be the ones causing the trouble by going after slow-moving species such as gouramis or even angelfish. But it all depends on the personality of your particular fish, because not all bettas behave the same. Some are very peaceful, while others will terrorize every other fish in the tank. However, they do tend to mellow out as they age because they just don't have the energy to chase the other fish anymore. And obviously, keeping two male bettas in the same tank is a recipe for disaster. Speaking of which, I once went to a wedding reception where each table had a decorative centerpiece on it that consisted of a vase with flowers, and inside each vase was a single male betta. As the evening progressed and the adult beverages continued to flow, a couple of the intoxicated guests foolishly thought that it would be a good idea to place two of the male bettas together in a single vase and watch them fight. Luckily, this heartless act was noticed right away by the other members of the wedding party, and we quickly put an end to this cruel game. But there were several children present who saw the way these bettas were being mistreated by the adults, and I thought to myself, what message are they sending to the next generation? Our children and our grandchildren learn by watching us, so please keep this in mind when you decide that it's okay for a fish to spend its life living in a tiny bowl of dirty water. Because our world needs more people with compassion and respect for each other, as well as for the beautiful creatures that live beside us. So be the fish and see the world through their eyes, and please try to give your betta the best life that you can, because no fish should be forced to live in a wine glass, and no child should be taught that this is an acceptable way to treat another living creature.